What if I told you that hate might just be the most dangerous way to hide a desire? That the person you can't stand the most could be the very one who will leave you breathless? This isn't just a story about a holiday in paradise. It's a battle of teasing, uncontrollable chemistry, and a romance no one saw coming. Before the story begins, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell to help the channel grow and for these stories to reach even more people. Los Angeles had that particular smell of a hot city at dusk, a mix of heated asphalt, freshly evaporated gasoline, and the artificial sweetness drifting from coffee shops that spilled caramel into the air to lure in customers. The sun still shone high, reflecting off the glass of the buildings and stretching long shadows across the asphalt. Zadie walked along the busy Melrose sidewalk, her heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete, the light linen dress swaying as she carried a bag filled with books she swore she had no room for in her suitcase, but knew she would end up packing anyway. Beside her, Ciela and Thalia chattered, laughing loudly, while Talon typed furiously on his phone, probably sending ironic voice messages to some ex who didn't even deserve a reply. 15 days, people. 15 days away from meetings, away from deadlines, away from… Zadie inhaled deeply, as if she wanted to bottle up the oxygen of that future that hadn't even arrived yet. And most of all, away from annoying men. Honey, you say annoying men as if you didn't have one particular in mind, Ciela teased, arching her brow with mischief as she adjusted the oversized sunglasses that made her look like a diva even while crossing the street. Zadie rolled her eyes, but the name appeared in her mind anyway. Robert. He was like a digital virus, the kind that slips into your system only to freeze everything at the worst possible moment. The problem was, unlike a virus, Robert had a dangerously irresistible smile that couldn't be deleted from memory. Don't start, Ciela. I'm going to drink my iced tea by the ocean, stare at the horizon, and pretend the male species doesn't exist. And it'll last exactly 3 hours before some Greek god at the resort asks if he can rub sunscreen on your back. Talon cut in, biting into a sugar-coated donut and letting the crumbs fall flawlessly over his white linen pants. He brushed them off with a napkin as if it were part of the style. And you, of course, will huff, give him some sassy comeback, and then spend the next few days obsessing over the guy. No, Zadie laughed, but her tone carried stubborn conviction. I want a real vacation. Sleeping in, laughing with you guys, eating pancakes with maple syrup without guilt, and silence. Thalia sighed as if the scene was straight out of a romantic movie. I can already see myself by the pool, sipping fresh lemonade while watching the sunset. The rideshare car pulled up, and the 4 of them piled in, still debating over suitcases, clothes, and just how many pairs of sandals were acceptable for a 15-day trip. The city sounds faded into the background, replaced by the bubbling excitement only promised vacations could bring. Across town, Robert leaned against the polished metal railing of a rooftop bar in downtown, the warm night breeze mingling with the scent of bourbon and expensive grilled meats. Drifting from the outdoor area, neon lights reflected against the glass of his drink, where the ice clinked slowly as it melted. He idly stirred the cubes with his finger when Dastan approached, phone in hand, wearing the grin of someone about to drop a bomb. Man, look at this! He held out the glowing screen with Ciela's story. Open suitcases, colorful dresses, and Zadie in the background rolling her eyes at the camera. The caption flashed in neon. Caribbean, here we come. Robert raised a brow, a slow smile spreading across his face. Don't tell me our dear Zadie Renner is about to bless the Caribbean with her bad temper. Exactly, Dastan laughed, ordering another round of beers. I bet she'll terrorize the waiters because the lemonade won't have enough ice. Theodoro, more serious, adjusted the dark sunglasses he insisted on wearing even at night, despite constant protests. You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Robert took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Me? Never. I just find the coincidence fascinating. Coincidence, my ass. Dastan dropped into the chair beside him. You're going to book the same resort. I know that look. Maybe, Robert admitted with that defiant air that always made his friends sigh in resignation. But tell me, what fun would it be to let Zadie have a peaceful vacation when I could turn her trip into an unforgettable show? The 3 clinked glasses. And, the decision lingered in the hot Los Angeles air, like gunpowder waiting for a spark. The next encounter was pure chance, or maybe fate mocking them. Zadie stepped into a modern West Hollywood bookstore, scented with polished wood and roasted coffee, only to come face to face with Robert at the counter, holding a hardcover book like it was a trophy. The clash of their eyes was immediate, so sharp it made the street noise outside vanish into silence. "Oh no," she muttered, more to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. Robert turned slowly, that lazy smile appearing like a loaded weapon. "Renner, what a pleasant surprise. Didn't know they sold sarcasm bottled up here. If they did, you would have bought out the entire stock." Zadie brushed past him, grabbing some random book off the shelf, just so she wouldn't have to look directly at that annoyingly handsome face. He tilted his head, studying her with calculated attention. "So, Caribbean, huh? Hope you... No suntan lotion won't wipe out that sharp tongue." She froze, surprised he knew. "Spying on my friend's socials now, Calder? That's low, even for you." Robert only laughed, that deep laugh that somehow had the power to both irritate her and stir something she'd never admit. "Maybe I just have good informants," Zadie huffed, tossing her hair back. "Well, keep having fun with your gossip because I've got far better plans than wasting time being annoyed by you." Robert smirked, leaning in just close enough for the woody trace of his aftershave, mingling with the coffee-scented air, to create an invisible tension. "Wasting time with you was never annoying, Renner. On the contrary, it's always been my favorite kind of entertainment." Zadie lifted her chin, refusing to give him the satisfaction of an answer, and walked away with firm steps, her heart racing with anger and a restless unease she refused to name. For her, that encounter ended there. Robert, however, stayed at the counter, swirling his glass between his fingers as if silently toasting his own audacity. The Caribbean, suddenly, seemed far more promising. Zadie's apartment looked like an elegant battlefield, suitcases sprawled open on the floor, colorful dresses scattered across the bed, sandals in mismatched pairs, and 3 friends who offered more opinions than actual help. The open window let in the warm Los Angeles breeze, mixed with the smell of strong coffee that Thalia insisted on brewing every 20 minutes. "You don't need 5 black dresses," Ciela remarked, holding 2 hangers with a critical expression. "This is a trip to the Caribbean, not a collective funeral. First, black is foolproof. Second, you never know when someone will annoy me enough to make me consider a collective funeral." Zadie tossed a white silk blouse into the suitcase, folding it with exaggerated precision, as if trying to control something more than just the fabric. Talon emerged from the closet wearing a wide-brimmed hat and flamingo print shorts. "I demand someone appreciate the level of fashion scandal I'm about to unleash. You're going to look like a walking tropical cocktail," Thalia laughed, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. "Exactly, darling, and a tropical cocktail never goes unnoticed." Talon winked before tossing the hat into Zadie's suitcase just to annoy her. "In case you need to hide from the shame of being seen. With me." Zadie looked up from the zipper she was tugging and sighed. "I just want 2 weeks of silence. Is that too much to ask?" Ciela flopped belly down onto the bed, resting her chin in her hands. "Silence? With us? With Talon? Honey, you'll get everything but that." The apartment filled with laughter, and for a moment the weight of Los Angeles faded. That was what Zadie wanted. Easy laughter, sunshine, and nothing that reminded her of him. Meanwhile, across town, the scene was no less chaotic. Robert's loft smelled of leather, whiskey, and cold pizza. Dastan was sprawled on the couch, scrolling on his phone, while Theodoro carefully packed a toiletry bag with sunscreen, bug spray, and even motion sickness pills. "You look like my grandmother," Dastan mocked, throwing a pillow at Theodoro. "Who packs motion sickness pills before even knowing if they're going to get sick? Someone sensible." Theodoro adjusted the bottles as if arranging a pharmacy display. "Unlike you, who'll drink margaritas until you pass out the very first night." Robert came out of the bedroom already in sunglasses, despite it being nighttime, tossing his car keys onto the table with a smile that blended mockery and determination. "Booked." "What?" Dastan straightened up. "The resort." Robert poured himself a whiskey and raised the glass in triumph. "Same days, same place. You're really going to cross the entire country and fly to the Caribbean just to bother the woman who hates you most on the planet?" Of course. Robert downed it in one gulp. It'll be fun. Or it'll end in tragedy. Dastan shrugged, already amused. But hey, I'm in. I wouldn't miss this show for anything. 2 days later, LAX airport was a noisy hive of luggage, loudspeakers announcing flights, and the vague smell of reheated coffee mixed with fast food. Zadie and her friends were in the check-in line, each dragging suitcases that seemed to weigh more than allowed. I should have brought only 2 pairs of sandals, Thalia complained, trying to close an overstuffed suitcase. 2? Talon laughed. Honey, I brought 8. Style doesn't take vacations. Ciela adjusted the straw hat on her head and nudged Zadie. You look nervous. I'm not nervous. She shot back too quickly. I'm anticipating the chaos of group travel. But deep down, an uneasy knot twisted in her stomach. The memory of Robert in the bookstore was still too fresh. His smile still burned like a warning. Boarding was announced, and the group walked through the gate with the collective thrill only tropical vacations can bring. In another terminal, not far away, Robert and his friends were going through security. Dastan was already filming stories of himself with the caption, Caribbean, get ready for the Calder Hurricane and Co. You're posting that? Theodoro asked, sliding his shoes onto the X-ray belt. Obviously. Dastan grinned, turning the camera to Robert. Look at this guy. Doesn't he look like the charming villain from a bad movie? Robert adjusted his casual blazer, smiled at the camera with fake innocence and replied, Not a bad movie, a romantic comedy, and I always steal the scene. The flight was long, carried along by snarky conversations, shared headphones, and the growing sense that something was about to spin out of control. Zadie slept with her head resting on Thalia's shoulder, dreaming of beaches and silence. Robert, in another row, clinked glasses with Dastan and Theodoro, his mind already scheming all the ways to torment his favorite enemy. When the plane began descending over the turquoise Caribbean Sea, both their hearts raced, for completely different reasons. Zadie felt a sweet relief in her stomach, as if she were about to dive into a new version of herself. Robert, on the other hand, felt nothing but wicked excitement. 15 days in the same resort as Zadie Renner. 15 days to poke, provoke, and draw out every annoyed expression that entertained him so much. What neither of them knew was that between the scorching sun, the chilled drinks, and the inevitable encounters, the carefully cultivated hatred back in Los Angeles was about to turn into something neither could control. The car that took them to the resort drove down roads lined with palm trees and the salty scent of the sea. Zadie's friends were mesmerized by the scenery, pointing out every detail as if it were a living postcard. She, however, could hardly wait to drop her bag in the room and dive into the pool. At the resort entrance, uniformed staff handed out white towels and glasses of chilled lemonade. The lobby smelled of polished wood and tropical flowers. This is paradise, Thalia sighed, spinning around on her heels. Until someone ruins it, Talon muttered, grabbing 2 glasses of lemonade at once. As if destiny had heard him, a black car pulled up at the entrance, and out stepped Robert, followed by Dastan and Theodoro. Their eyes met across the glowing atrium, and the shock was instant. Zadie nearly dropped her suitcase. No, Robert smiled, slow and venomous. Yes. The entire resort seemed to hold its breath for a second, and it was in that charged silence that the war began, one no one was prepared to witness. They only wanted a vacation, but fate decided that 15 days in the same resort would be more explosive than any season in Los Angeles. The tense silence in the lobby that had held everyone captive for a few seconds broke apart under the sound of suitcase wheels sliding across the polished floor. Zadie took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, while her friends stared at her as if they had just witnessed the start of a forbidden reality show. This can't be real, she muttered, gripping the handle of her suitcase tightly. But it is, Talon replied, taking a sip of the second lemonade he'd grabbed. And I already want popcorn. Robert crossed the atrium with lazy strides, every inch of him radiating irritating confidence. The sunlight pouring through the glass doors lit up his broad shoulders, perfect tan, and that damn smile designed to send chills and fury in equal measure. You followed me here? Zadie shot out, her voice low, almost a whisper but laced with venom. A delicious coincidence, don't you think? Robert answered, never losing his drawl. Seems like The universe enjoys giving me gifts. Dastan and Theodoro trailed behind, both dragging suitcases like luxury extras in the scene. But even their presence couldn't diminish the fact that Robert stole all the air from the lobby. Even the receptionist, handing out towels with a mechanical smile, let her mouth fall open for a second when she looked at him. Ciela crossed her arms, glancing between the two and her friends. This is going to be good. Thalia sighed, dreamy. He's handsome. Handsome? Talon nearly choked on his drink. Honey, that man isn't handsome. He's illegal. He should have a sign hanging around his neck that says, "Warning, excessive testosterone may cause fainting." Zadie huffed, but she couldn't stop her gaze from lingering a fraction too long on the line of his jaw, on the way the white linen shirt hinted at his chest. She hated herself for it. No. Let's go to the room, she ordered, dragging her friends along. Robert merely tilted, his chin in farewell, his eyes locked on hers as if to say, this war is only beginning. The bungalows were lined with palm trees, each with a private porch and wooden chairs facing the ocean. Zadie pushed open the door to hers with force, letting the suitcase drop onto the plush rug. The blast of air conditioning cooled her heated skin, but it wasn't enough to calm her boiling blood. Coincidence? She muttered, kicking off her shoes. He's the very definition of a plague. Plague with abs, Talon corrected, throwing himself into the armchair. I saw you looking. I wasn't looking. Zadie snapped back too quickly. Ciela flopped onto the bed on her back. Girl, if even I looked, you looked too. Okay, he's handsome, extremely handsome. Zadie rubbed her face, frustrated. But it's like appreciating fire. You can admire it from a distance, you just can't touch it. Thalia laughed. The problem is, you look like you want to touch it. Shut up. Zadie tossed a pillow at her, but she couldn't stop the nervous laugh that slipped out. The next morning, the sun exploded in golden tones over the beach. The air was thick with the scent of sunscreen, salt, and tropical fruit, and the resort's pool was already packed with lively guests. Zadie walked down with her friends, her black bikini hidden beneath a light cover-up, with a clear plan: claim the best lounge chair before anyone else did. But of course, someone had already stolen. Robert was sprawled out in the most coveted chair, the one with the perfect view of the ocean, wearing only navy blue swim shorts. Shirtless, his body looked sculpted to inspire bad decisions. Defined abs, broad shoulders, sun-kissed skin gleaming under the light. Zadie froze halfway there, her heart racing before anger washed over her like a cold wave. No, she muttered. Yes, Talon sang, already pulling out his phone to record the scene. Look at this. Rare specimen in his natural habitat. Ciela sighed. I feel like a mere mortal. Thalia blushed, lowering her eyes. He looks like a Greek statue. An annoying Greek statue, Zadie corrected, tugging at her cover-up with unnecessary force. Someone should throw him back in the museum and lock the door. Robert noticed their presence and lifted his sunglasses, revealing eyes that gleamed. The smile appeared slowly, lazily, as if he already knew he'd won that round before it even, began. Renner. He adjusted himself in the chair, the muscles of his abdomen tightening in a way that seemed rehearsed. I see the Caribbean still managed to bring its clouds. And I see you brought your overinflated ego on the plane. I hope you didn't pay extra baggage for it. Dastan, sitting in another chair, burst out laughing. I like her. Theodoro sighed, rubbing sunscreen onto his arms. You two are going to destroy this resort before the first week is over. Don't worry, Theodoro, Robert continued, turning back to Zadie. I'm civilized. I just can't promise to be quiet. Zadie clenched her teeth, trying to ignore the hypnotic vision before her. She hated that. For an instant, she had gotten lost in the details. The drop of water sliding from his neck down to disappear over his abdomen, the way the sun carved shadows across his muscles. She hated most of all how it made her swallow hard. I can't promise to be patient either. She shot back, throwing her beach bag onto another lounge chair with such force it nearly knocked off a guest's towel. The next hours were a silent duel. Every time Zadie tried to dive into the book she had brought, Robert would make some comment loud enough to annoy her. Every time he closed his eyes to rest, she would laugh at something Talon said, a laugh that sounded like pure provocation. At the pool bar, the clash picked up a new round. An iced tea, extra cold, please, Zadie asked the bartender, smiling politely. Make it two, Robert said beside her, suddenly appearing. I don't want her drinking alone. I didn't ask for company. Zadie leaned her elbow on the counter, idly twirling the straw between her fingers. In fact, if it were up to me, you'd be in the unwelcome guests wing. Lucky for you, the resort doesn't take such biased recommendations. Robert raised the glass the bartender handed him. 2-hour vacation, Renner. May it be unforgettable. She narrowed her eyes but clinked her glass against his, the sharp ring sounding like a pact of war. That night, the resort hosted a welcome dinner by the sea, with torches lit and the scent of barbecue mingling with the ocean breeze. Zadie stepped into the tented hall with her friends, wearing a light red dress that highlighted every curve without effort. Robert was already there, laughing at something Dastan said, but the laughter died halfway when his eyes found hers. Talon leaned in and whispered, "If looks could kill, you two would already be 6 feet under the sand." Ciela added, "Or making out." Thalia sighed, as always. "I'm rooting for the second option." Zadie ignored them, lifting her chin and walking past Robert as if he were invisible. But his scent, a mix of whiskey, salt, and something dangerously male, followed her like a shadow. Later, when the music started and guests were pulled onto the dance floor, Robert appeared behind her with a half smile. "A dance, Renner? I'd rather dive into shark-infested waters." "Well, dancing with me is almost the same thing." He held out his hand, and for a moment she hesitated. But before she could refuse, Talon shoved her so hard she stumbled straight into Robert's arms. The contact was electric, unexpected. His body was warm, solid, his breath close to her ear. "Relax, it's just a dance." His voice was low, dangerous. "I promise not to bite. I don't trust your promises." Zadie tried to keep her tone firm, but her skin was already burning under the pressure of his hand at her waist. They danced, bodies close, hatred serving as fuel for a chemistry neither of them wanted to admit. For a few seconds, the world around them seemed to vanish, until Zadie pulled away abruptly, taking a deep breath. "Enjoy your party, Calder." Her voice came out steady, but her eyes still burned with the intensity of the moment. Robert only smiled, satisfied. The war was officially declared. But what no one imagined was that, between fought-over lounge chairs, barroom provocations, and forced dances, the thin line between hate and desire was about to disappear, and the coming days promised to turn every second into a spark, ready to set both their hearts on fire. The next morning dawned golden in the Caribbean, with the salty scent of the sea mixed with the sweet aroma of pancakes being served at the resort's restaurant. Zadie crossed the lobby with her friends, trying to maintain composure, but with every step she felt the tension gather in her shoulders. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, just knowing Robert was staying only a few yards away made the air feel heavier. "Well, I woke up ready to laugh," Talon announced, scrolling through his phone while balancing oversized sunglasses on his face. "Because, darling, life has placed your ego's greatest enemy on vacation with you. I'm going to savor every second of this. He's not my enemy," Zadie shot back automatically. "Of course not," Talon arched a brow. "He's only the man who makes you boil with rage with one sentence, or with one muscle." Ciela and Thalia exchanged knowing looks. "We're not even trying to argue with him, girl." Thalia laughed. "We're just here to support you and record the moment you realize you hate how much you love hating this man. You're all delusional." Zadie shook her head, but her conviction sounded fragile. The group headed outside, where breakfast was served beneath a large white tent. The smell of crispy bacon and fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the sound of the ocean brushing softly against the sand. Zadie had barely sat down when she heard the voice she wanted most to avoid, and at the same time the one her body recognized before her mind. "Good morning, neighbors." Robert appeared behind them, his sunglasses hanging from the collar of a light gray t-shirt. Dastan and Theodoro trailed close, both wearing lazy smiles like men who had already accepted the chaos of this trip. Zadie closed her eyes for a moment, murmuring something between a prayer and an insult. "Why does the universe hate me?" Robert pulled out a chair with ease, sitting at the table beside them without even asking. "Because it's more fun this way." "Well, look at that, the Bungalow neighbors." Talon clapped his hands. "This breakfast is going to be good." Ciela, curious, leaned toward Dastan. So do you two always let him drag you into traps, or is this a special edition? Collector's edition, Dastan winked. But it's worth it. Always makes for good stories. Theodoro adjusted his glasses and added, and headaches, lots of headaches. Thalia, blushing, smiled shyly. Well, at least you seem fun. Robert leaned toward Zadie, close enough for her to feel his warmth. You want to scold me first thing in the morning? Or would you rather wait until this afternoon? She raised her coffee cup like it was a shield. I'd rather you choke on your own tongue. But then I'd lose the chance to use it for… He left the phrase hanging, his eyes glinting with mischief. Zadie nearly choked on her coffee. You're insufferable, and you're predictable. Robert smiled, which is why I always win. Later, the entire group was summoned by the resort for an icebreaker activity, a boat trip across the region's crystal-clear waters. Zadie's friends were excited, already picturing perfect photos to post while she huffed, trying to push away the uncomfortable thought of spending hours in the same space as Robert. Relax, it's going to be fun, Ciela assured, adjusting her straw hat. Worst-case scenario, you toss him overboard. Tempting. Zadie smirked. The boat waited at the pier, painted white and blue, with a cheerful crew handing out life jackets and chilled drinks. The briny scent of the sea was strong, mixed with the sharp tang of motor fuel. Robert was already there, shirtless, only in swim shorts, his tan gleaming under the sun. Zadie froze on the pier steps as if struck by an electric shock. His body looked like a provocation made to order. Defined abs, broad shoulders, droplets of water glistening from his last swim. Breathe, darling, Talon whispered in her ear. It's not a sin to look. Just don't start praying. He's too much, Thalia blurted, before covering her mouth with her hand. Gila shook her head, laughing. Too much doesn't cover it. That man could crash the world economy with those abs. Zadie took a deep breath, marching onto the boat as if heading into battle. Robert greeted her with a lazy smile. I hope you know how to swim, Renner. I don't want to have to save you. The idea of owing you my life is worse than sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Then pray you don't trip. He winked. The boat set off, cutting through the turquoise waters as the wind whipped through everyone's hair. Laughter, American pop from the 2000s blasting from the speakers, and drinks served in plastic cups created the perfect vacation atmosphere. Dastan had already sidled up to Ciela, trading sharp banter, while Theodoro patiently listened to Thalia's stories. Talon, of course, was in the middle of both groups, laughing loudly and recording everything for future emotional blackmail. So Zadie, always so tense. Robert came closer, leaning on the railing beside her. What's the part you hate the most so far? You breathing. She didn't take her eyes off the horizon. I can hold my breath for a bit. He inhaled deeply, puffing out his chest and holding it theatrically, his abs tightening in a way that made her swallow hard. Zadie turned quickly, furious at herself for noticing too much. You're pathetic and irresistible. He exhaled, satisfied. Admit it, Renner. All this hatred is starting to blur into something else. The urge to shove you into the sea. Exactly that. Robert grinned, biting his lip. But be careful. If you push me in, I'll drag you with me. When the boat stopped at a paradisiacal cove, the guide announced, time to swim. Guests dove in with excitement, laughter mixing with splashes in the crystal-clear water. Zadie hesitated for a second but didn't want to look like a coward. She pulled off her cover-up and jumped. The rush of cool water wrapping around her body felt liberating. Until, a few minutes later, a careless move pushed her farther than she had planned. When she tried to swim back, a light current resisted her strokes. The boat suddenly seemed farther away. Oh no! She flailed her arms, panic rising. That was when a shadow plunged in near her. Robert, strong, agile, cutting through the water as if he belonged to it. He reached her quickly, gripping her waist. Relax. I've got you. His voice, muffled by the sea, was steady. Zadie tried to protest, but she was breathless. She clung to his neck on instinct, her body pressed against his, heat radiating even through the water. Every muscle against hers seemed to mock her resistance. When they surfaced, Robert held her close, his face so near she could feel the drops sliding from his mouth to her skin. See? He murmured, panting. I told you I'd end up saving you. I hate you. Her voice came out weak, more from nerves than rage. Hate me so much you can't. Let go. He smiled, swimming back with her wrapped around him. Everyone on the boat was watching, some laughing, others shouting commentary. I'm going to die laughing. Talon nearly toppled into the water from laughing so hard. This isn't a vacation, it's a soap opera. Ciela waved her hands like a sports announcer. And in the left corner, Zadie, Iron Pride. Renner. In the right, Robert Killer Abs Calder. Thalia covered her face, blushing. This is so romantic. Dastan and Theodoro clinked their beers together. I told you it would be fun. When Robert finally helped her back up, Zadie was breathless, pressed far too close to his body to keep her sanity. He held her hand until the very last second, his eyes sparking with provocation. Thank you, she spat, more like an insult than gratitude. You're welcome, darling. He winked. You can owe me one. The boat carried on, but nothing went back to normal. The air between them was charged, every glance more intense, every barb laced with double meaning. And for the first time, Zadie wondered if 15 days would be enough to resist the most infuriating and most tempting enemy she had ever known. The next day dawned lazy, with waves breaking gently on the beach and the sweet smell of fresh fruit drifting across the resort's courtyard. Zadie pulled back the bungalow curtain and let the light flood the room, blinking against the harsh brightness. Her friends were still stretching, out in bed, while Talon paraded around in a fluffy white bathrobe like a Hollywood star on a film set. Today is a day of nothing, he declared, slipping on oversized sunglasses. Nothing but sunbathing, selfies, and maybe a piña colada. Piña colada is cliché. Ciela laughed, twisting her hair into a high bun. I want iced tea. Extra cold. I want peace. Zadie flopped into the armchair with a sigh. The word echoed inside her uncomfortably. Peace. As much as she tried to relax, something was off. A gnawing sense of absence she refused to name. Since the chaos on the boat the day before, she hadn't seen Robert anywhere around the resort. Not by the pool, not at the bar, not prowling with that infuriating smile. His disappearance should have been a relief. And in some ways it was, but why then did her eyes automatically scan the surroundings every time she entered a room? She hated admitting it. You're looking again. Talon dropped onto the couch, crossing his legs like a diva, side to side, searching. I'm not searching for anything. Zadie snatched a magazine from the table, flipping through without seeing a single page. Sure, Ciela smirked. You're just scanning the place like a CIA agent. Thalia, always gentler, bit her lip. It's normal, girl. After everything yesterday, you're just curious. Curious is the word people use when they don't want to say obsessed. Talon burst out laughing, clapping his hands. Oh, this is delicious, you falling into your own trap and he's not even here. I'm not falling into anything. Zadie tossed the magazine back onto the table. I'm just alert, because when you least expect it, Robert shows up to ruin your day. Of course, Talon sing-songed. You don't miss him at all. Zadie sighed, pressing her forehead into her hand. No, I don't miss him. Do I? Meanwhile, elsewhere on the island, Robert walked a trail lined with tall trees alongside Dastan and Theodoro. The smell of damp earth and the call of tropical birds made the hike a change from the sun-soaked routine of the resort. Admit it, Dastan said, kicking a stone down the path. You only agreed to this hike because you wanted to disappear from Renner's sight. Wrong. Robert smiled, running his hand along the moss-covered trunk of a tree. I agreed because I wanted to disappear from my own. Translation: You're confused. Theodoro adjusted his glasses. And you won't admit it? Robert shrugged, but his mind was far more restless than he let on. He thought of Zadie more than he cared to. Not romantically, of course. He didn't believe in that sugary nonsense. But there was something fascinating about the way she stood up to him, as if immune to his charm. Except she wasn't. He'd seen it on the boat. The way she clutched his neck, the way she breathed against his mouth. That hadn't been just desperation. There was something there. The problem was that it had hit him too. He huffed, kicking the sand. Say whatever you want. I just like to play. Sure, Dastan laughed. But from what I saw, this game already hit you harder than you expected. Robert didn't answer. But inside, he knew Dastan was right. Night fell over the resort. bringing colorful lights strung between palm trees and lively music echoing across the main courtyard. It was karaoke night, one of the mandatory activities organized by the staff. Guests laughed, some already too giddy from margaritas and beer, while the makeshift stage welcomed the first victims willing to belt out off-key American classics. Zadie stepped into the hall with Talon and her friends, adjusting the short blue dress that showed off her legs. Her heart raced for no apparent reason, as if it already knew what was about to happen. Her eyes swept the room, searching, and then she saw him. Robert walked in a few minutes later, wearing a white linen shirt unbuttoned at the top and light-colored trousers. His tan looked even deeper under the golden light, his hair perfectly tousled in a way that seemed deliberate. And as always, everyone looked. Women, men, even the staff. He had that damn ability to pull all the attention. Zadie held her breath, hating every second of how her body reacted. He looks like a mirage. Thalia sighed. A sinful mirage. Talon widened his eyes, fanning himself with his hand. I don't usually say this about straight men, but my God, what a monument. Ciela smirked. Good luck, girl. Robert found her in the middle of the hall, their eyes locked like magnets. His smile spread slow, venomous, and he walked toward her, parting the crowd as if he owned the place. Renner. His voice was low, dripping with provocation. Missed me? I was hoping you'd gotten lost on the island. He laughed, moving closer until she could feel his warmth against her skin. His hand settled firmly on her waist, not asking for permission. You know what they say, if you can't escape, dance. And before she could protest, he pulled her onto the makeshift dance floor, the sound of a 2000s pop song blasting from the speakers. Zadie tried to resist, but his body was strong, steady, and the way he led made her stumble over her own steps. He smiled, pulling her closer. You dance the way you fight, he murmured, with rage and a little hidden pleasure. I'm not feeling any pleasure, she scoffed, but the heat rising in her face betrayed her. Then why don't you stop smiling? Her eyes widened, realizing she actually was smiling. Damn it. The song ended to applause, and the karaoke host was already announcing the next challenge. Duets. Talon, of course, didn't miss his chance. You too, he shouted, pointing at Zadie and Robert. Get up on stage. Over my dead body. Zadie crossed her arms. Me neither, Robert replied, but with a smile that said the exact opposite. In less than 2 minutes, both were on stage, shoved by their friends and egged on by the crowd. The microphone in their hands felt more like a weapon than a musical instrument. The music started, a provocative classic. They stared each other down, trading verses like insults disguised in melody. The audience laughed, clapped, cheered with every cutting look and every calculated move closer. At the chorus, Robert pulled Zadie by the hand, pressing her against him, and sang straight into her ear. She shivered, her eyes half closed, but fired back with equal strength, her voice steady, almost defiant. When the song ended, the eruption of applause felt more for their chemistry than for their pitch. That was intense, Thalia whispered, eyes shining. That was emotional porn. Talon fanned himself theatrically. I'm alive by sheer miracle. Ciela burst out laughing. You two have to admit you were born to hate each other. And maybe for something else too. Zadie stepped off the stage with her heart racing, trying to ignore the heat that still lingered where Robert had touched her. He, meanwhile, watched her with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity. Neither of them would admit it, but something had changed that night, and everyone around them had noticed. Later, back at the bungalow, Zadie lay down, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel his scent, the weight of his hand on her waist, the sound of his, voice so close. She hated to admit it, but the memory wouldn't leave her mind. In the bungalow next door, Robert poured himself a glass of whiskey, while Dastan and Theodoro argued about the next activity. He pretended not to listen, lost in thoughts he'd never dare say out loud. She wasn't in love, neither was he, but the chemistry now was impossible to deny. The afternoon settled over the resort with a lazy sun scattering 1,000 sparks across the main pool. The smell of chlorine, mixed with coconut lotion that lingered in the air like a promise of endless vacation. Laughter echoed from a group of children playing at the edge. The bar nearby gave off the aroma of grilled burgers and fries, and the clinking of glassware blended with the soft background music drifting from the speakers. Zadie spread her towel across the lounge chair, rubbing sunscreen onto her legs with the determination of someone trying to ignore the obvious. This was the most dangerous territory in the resort, and it had nothing to do with the pool's depth. It had to do with him. She could still feel yesterday's memory burning on her skin. Robert, strong, swimming toward her, saving her on the boat, the unbearable closeness, the inevitable press of their bodies. Since then, she had been repeating to herself that she would give no room for that to happen again. The problem? Robert seemed to specialize in replaying the very scenes she wanted erased. I love this pool. Denalia sighed, dipping her feet into the water. It's like being inside a gemstone. A gemstone that smells like chlorine, Talon corrected, already with a glass of lemonade in hand. But fine, I love it anyway. Ciela adjusted her sunglasses and glanced around. Only one thing missing for the perfect drama. Don't you dare. Zadie raised a warning finger. If you say his name, I swear I'll throw you in the water. Ciela smirked, feline. I was going to say ice cream, but thanks for confessing who's on your mind. Zadie choked on her own breath. He's not. Talon laughed. Darling, even the pool can tell you're looking. Zadie sank back into the chair, determined to ignore it, but it was useless. Her gaze roamed the space, scanning every shadow, every reflection, as if her body acted on its own. And when she finally saw him, she knew she was doomed. Robert surfaced at the pool's edge, rising from the water as if rehearsed for a forbidden men's cologne. Commercial. Wet hair clung to his forehead, droplets ran down his neck until vanishing across his broad chest, and only his eyes were above the surface. Blue, intense, fixed on her. No doubt about it, he was staring directly at her. The world seemed to fall silent for a moment. The music, the voices, everything disappeared until only that gaze remained. Zadie swallowed hard, a shiver running down her spine. I'm going to faint. Talon fanned himself with the towel. That man isn't real. He looks like he was built in a lab. Ciela burst out laughing. No, he's pure danger. Thalia murmured. He looks like a Greek god. Robert didn't move for a few seconds, just his eyes above the water, like a silent predator choosing its prey. Then slowly he swam toward the edge closest to her lounge chair, emerging fully. Renner. His deep voice rumbled like muffled thunder, dripping with provocation. Thought of me? Not for a second. Zadie answered too quickly. Adjusting her straw hat to hide the haste of her denial, he smiled, climbing up the metal ladder. Water streamed down his body as if placed there just to torment her. The navy swim shorts clung to him, and every step was a cruel reminder that male perfection could be a weapon. Robert stopped in front of her, crouching down to her eye level. Strands of wet hair dripped onto her skin, cold against the heat of the sun. He reached out his hand, as if to pick something invisible. You've got sand in your hair. He brushed lightly through her strands, his fingers sliding far too slowly to be innocent. Let me help. Zadie shivered. The touch was brief, but enough to send electric jolts through her entire body. Don't touch me. Her voice came out low, without the firmness she wanted. Hard to resist, he murmured, leaning a little closer, his mouth dangerously near her neck. You know what the problem is, Renner. You pretend you don't like it, but the body doesn't lie. He brushed his lips near her skin, not touching, just letting his warm breath sketch shivers along her neck. Zadie flinched, the hair on her arms rising. Get out, she exclaimed. Not until you admit it. He lifted his gaze, his eyes locked on hers. Not until you recognize that, for at least a second, you wanted me close. The silence between them was broken by Talon's laughter, loud enough to draw everyone's attention. This isn't a vacation, it's a prime time. Dope! He threw his head back. I'm going to die laughing before this trip is over. Ciela crossed her arms, satisfied. I warned you this would happen. Thalia rested her chin on her hand, studying every inch of him as if evaluating artwork at an auction. If they sold that in pieces, I'd take out a loan. Zadie shoved Robert lightly, her heart racing. You're unbearable. He straightened, pleased, running his wet hair back. And you're delicious to provoke. The rest of the, afternoon was a duel disguised as relaxation. Every time Zadie tried to read, Robert dove near her, splashing water on purpose. Every time she turned to her side on the lounge chair, he appeared with a poisonous comment. You'll burn if you don't put on sunscreen. He leaned in, offering the bottle with a suggestive smile. Want me to rub it on? If you touch me, I'll shove that bottle down your throat. What a delightful threat. He laughed. Their friends watched as if it were luxury entertainment. Dastan even ordered popcorn from the bar just to make the scene even more ridiculous. You two do realize you're basically flirting, right? He teased. No. Zadie and Robert snapped at the same time, whipping toward each other like two gladiators. Of course not, Robert added, still smiling. She just can't stay away. You're delusional. Zadie narrowed her eyes. Delusional with pleasure. He winked, and Dastan's laughter echoed until it hurt. When the sun began to dip, painting the sky orange, Zadie finally pulled away, claiming she needed to get ready for dinner. Robert watched her walk toward the bungalow, the light dress clinging to the bikini's damp outline. Theodoro approached, resting his arms on the pool's railing. You're playing with fire, Robert. The best kind of game. He smiled, grabbing the towel. And if you get burned? Robert thought for a moment, then shrugged. Then at least it will be worth it. In the room, Zadie faced the mirror, trying to ignore her flushed reflection. She could still feel his touch in her hair, his breath on her neck, his gaze beneath the water, and it infuriated her. I hate him, she muttered, squeezing her eyes shut. I hate him, but her body didn't seem to agree. While she fought with herself, Robert sat at the bar with Dastan and Theodoro, listening as the entertainment team announced the week's next event, the dance championship. Couples competing in different styles from swing to merengue, with prizes and of course the glory of being the resort's couple. Robert didn't hesitate. He signed up his name and without asking permission, Zadie's. You're insane. Theodoro shook his head. She's going to kill you. Even better. Robert raised his glass of whiskey, toasting his own boldness. Because that means we'll be dancing pressed close. Dastan roared with laughter. You're a genius of chaos. Robert only smiled. Fate was that night, Zadie would have a surprise that would change the course of the vacation. The sun had already disappeared on the horizon when the resort began to come alive again under the lights strung between the palm trees. Torches lit the paths, and the air now smelled of grilled meat, spices, and chilled white wine served in glass pitchers. The beachfront restaurant had been transformed for the dinner dance. Tables scattered beneath white tents, an improvised dance floor in the center, and a small stage ready for the entertainment team. Zadie walked alongside her friends, the dark green dress hugging her figure as if it had been made for the occasion. With every step, she felt Ciella's gaze analyzing her, Thalia sighing as if she were the one living the romance, and Talon trailing behind like a vicious commentator on a reality show. You look stunning, Ciella decreed. You'll thank me when half the guests start choking on dessert just from staring at you. I'm not trying to impress anyone. Zadie lifted her chin, but even to her own ears the firmness sounded forced. Of course, darling. Talon fanned himself with a makeshift napkin fan. You just happened to pick the most sinful dress in your suitcase because you adore the feeling of freedom. Thalia smiled. Either way, you look beautiful. Zadie drew a deep breath, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. She didn't want to think of him, but she knew that at some point tonight, Robert would appear, and when he did, she would have to be ready. Robert didn't take long. He entered the room a few minutes later, alongside Dastan and Theodoro, and for an instant, the place seemed to tilt on its axis. The white linen shirt, half unbuttoned, revealed a glimpse of tanned chest, and his lazy smile was enough to make every head turn. Zadie held her breath. God, how could he be so infuriating and so beautiful? Jesus Christ! Talon clutched her arm theatrically. That man doesn't enter a room, he struts. Thalia began, unable to finish the sentence. He's the problem, Zadie cut in, though she couldn't tear her eyes away. Robert never broke eye contact. He walked straight toward her, crossing the makeshift floor as if there were no one else around. When he stopped in front of her, the crowd blurred into nothing. Renner. His voice came low, almost intimate, laced with provocation. After putting up with me all day, I figured, you'd already have come up with an excuse to escape my company. She arched an eyebrow, trying to mask the impact. Escape? I call it survival, Calder. A miracle I didn't throw myself into the sea for some peace. Robert leaned in, his lips dangerously close to her ear. his warm breath mixed with the woody scent of the whiskey he'd had earlier. Funny, because deep down, you never back away. You spent the entire day provoking me just so you'd have a reason to look at me again now. The shiver was immediate, running down her spine. Zadie stepped back, but not quickly enough to fool her friends, who exchanged complicit looks like spectators watching a fire spread in slow motion. That was, Ciela smiled, wicked, magnetic. That was live, emotional porn. Talon's eyes widened. If I survive this vacation, I'm writing a book. Thalia only sighed, already lost in romantic daydreams. Dinner began with platters of grilled meat, tropical salads, and laughter filling the warm night air. Tables buzzed with conversation, guests toasted with glasses of wine, and the entertainment team moved among them. Zadie tried to keep her focus on her friends, but her eyes insisted on straying to Robert at the next table, surrounded by Dastan and Theodoro. He, of course, noticed, and made a point of toasting in her direction, as if every sip were a silent victory. When dessert arrived, the night's host bounded onto the stage with a microphone and the kind of enthusiasm fueled by 10 double espressos. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening," his voice boomed. "As you all know, tomorrow marks the start of our famous Resort Dance Championship, and tonight is the official reveal of the competing pairs." The hall erupted in applause and whistles. Zadie kept sipping her wine, detached, until she heard the first name that made her heart stop. "And on the list we have Robert Calder and Zadie Renner." The glass nearly slipped from her hand. "What?" Her voice rang louder than she intended. Every gaze turned, and Robert calmly raised his glass of whiskey, toasting in her direction with the most insolent smile he had ever worn. "No." Zadie shook her head, incredulous. "No, no, no." Ciela laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. "I'm going to die." Thalia covered her face with both hands, her eyes sparkling with emotion. "This is fate." Talon laughed until he was breathless. "This is primetime soap opera, my dear." At the next table, Dastan was laughing with tears in his eyes. "He's a genius of chaos." Theodoro only sighed, adjusting his glasses. "This is going to be a lot of work." Zadie stood abruptly, marching across the hall toward his table. Guests parted to make way, eager for the spectacle. "Have you lost your mind?" she snapped, her eyes blazing. Robert leaned his elbow on the table, utterly composed. "Crazy would be wasting the chance to hold you close on a dance floor." "I'm not participating." "Oh, but you're already signed up." He smiled, devilishly calm. "And it's a mandatory resort activity." "You can't," she began, but was cut off by the host, who repeated the names loudly for confirmation. "Robert Calder and Zadie Renner." Applause echoed through the hall. The guests already saw them as the main attraction. Zadie wished she could vanish, but the way Robert looked at her, steady, determined, made her breath falter. Later, on the bungalow's veranda, Zadie stared out at the moonlit sea, her heart still racing. The breeze carried the scent of salt and tropical flowers, but nothing calmed the storm inside her. She hated Robert, hated even more the fact that some part of her was thrilled at the thought of the dance. In the next room, Robert poured himself another glass of whiskey, smiling to himself. He knew he had crossed the line, but he didn't regret it, because their war had just found a new stage, and there was no way she could escape. The championship was set, and this time he would make sure every step of the dance was a provocation Zadie would never forget. The resort's event hall had been transformed into a mix of dance floor and torture chamber, at least in Zadie's opinion. The host of the evening, a Cuban man with enough energy to power the entire Caribbean, clapped his hands and announced, "Rehearsals begin tomorrow. Our dance couples will have to show not only talent but also chemistry." Chemistry, the word stuck to Zadie like a relentless mosquito. Of course, by some cruel twist of the universe, she was stuck with Robert Calder, the man she swore she hated and who now happened to be her dance partner. "Relax, Renner." His voice slid in from behind her, low, insolent. "Since you insist on hating me, you can use that anger to set the rhythm." She spun around fast, glaring at him. "I'd rather stumble than dance pressed against you." "Perfect," he smirked, stepping, just close enough to make her breath hitch. "Because stumbling means falling into my arms, and honestly, I think it's bound to happen anyway." Thalia, standing nearby, let out a short laugh. "If you do fall, Zadie, at least do it with style." The audience will thank you. Talon fanned himself dramatically with a colorful towel. I'll go prepare the smelling salts because if you two rehearse in the same room, the oxygen is going to catch fire. Zadie forced a laugh, but the unease stayed lodged in her chest. The night ended with her dragging herself back to the bungalow, lying down but unable to sleep. She listened to the waves crashing outside and could only think about the humiliation of having to share a stage with Robert. The worst part? A small, treacherous part of her actually wanted to know what it would feel like to truly dance with him. When the sun rose, palm trees casting long shadows across the veranda, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the restaurant, she realized there was no way out. She was officially trapped in a championship alongside the man she hated most. The rehearsal hall was ready, Latin music echoing from the speakers, and there he was. Light shorts, loose shirt, lazy gaze, and that smile of someone who knew exactly the effect he had. "Good morning, Renner." His low voice brushed over her like a touch. "Hope you slept well. You'll need the energy to handle my hands guiding you." Zadie huffed. But there was no escape. She placed her hand in his, feeling the heat of male skin, steady and sure. The problem wasn't his strength, it was the ease of it, as if he already knew exactly how to drive her insane with just a touch. The dance instructor set a Latin track, hot and pulsing, full of beats that demanded closeness. "Posture!" he shouted. "He leads, you follow." Robert raised a brow, provocative. "Hear that, Renner? I command, you obey." "Not even in my worst nightmares," called her. She tried to pull away, but he drew her back firmly. His body pressed against hers sparked an immediate jolt, as if every beat of the music was being translated into raw electricity. She tried to keep her eyes fixed on anything but his mouth, but it was useless. Those lips were right there, dangerously close, shaped to provoke. "You're blushing, Renner," he murmured, his mouth brushing near her ear. "Is it the heat of the dance or my body?" "It's the heat of the hell you brought into my vacation." She turned her face but still felt the shiver race down her spine. Her friends watched from a distance, amused, while Theodoro and Dastan simply clinked piña coladas, as if they were watching a soap opera. "This is better than any show," Theodoro remarked. "Swear I'm about to start betting on who caves first." "My money's on her." Dastan lifted his glass toward Zadie. "She's tough, but I've seen that look before. It's the same look of someone who wants badly, what they can't admit." In the days that followed, rehearsals became a show of their own. Robert kept his palm pressed against her waist, guiding her to the beat, firm enough not to be neutral, gentle enough not to be only technical, letting his lips hover dangerously close to her neck whenever he spun her. "Can you stop breathing so close to my neck, Calder?" she snapped, irritated, even as her body betrayed her. "Oh, but I do need to," he countered with a slow smile. "It's my way of marking territory." She nearly stumbled. "Territory? I'm not your property." "Good thing." He pulled her back, pressing their bodies together. "Because I wouldn't share you even if I wanted to." Her heart kicked hard, and she hated her own reaction. Worse, Talon noticed. "Zadie, you blinked twice as fast when he said that," Talon announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's the universal code for, I want to kiss you but can't admit it." "Shut up, Talon," she tried to pull away, but Robert held her firmly, laughing at her irritation. The night of the first performance arrived. The hall was packed, decorated with torches and colorful ribbons. 4 couples stepped onto the improvised stage. When the music began, Zadie and Robert danced as if they were fighting in silence. Every step a challenge, every spin a provocation. At one point, he pulled her back against his chest, so close her breath caught. "Gonna curse me out now or after the applause?" he murmured, eyes locked onto hers. "After, so I don't ruin the show." She tried to play it off, but her mouth was dangerously close to his, and the audience sighed, convinced a kiss would land right there. In the end, they finished in second place. The applause was loud, but Zadie exhaled in relief. At least they wouldn't have to deal with more attention than they already had. Robert, however, just leaned in and whispered in her ear before they left the stage. If that was second place, imagine what happens when we win. And the promise hung there, burning in the air, as if the first kiss was only a matter of time. The next morning, Zadie woke up with sore muscles she couldn't tell were from the dancing or from the tension of spending so much time pressed against Robert. As she tried to convince herself, it was just the spins and steps. Thalia walked into the room with a mischievous smile. "You know what I realized?" she said, sitting on the bed without asking. "You complain about Robert a lot, but you didn't take your eyes off him, not even when you tripped." "I tripped because he pulled me too hard," Zadie shot back, but she was red to the tips of her ears. Ciela appeared at the door, carrying fresh fruit. "Oh, sure. And why did your hand stay on his chest for 5 seconds after the stumble? Coincidence?" "Gravity," Zadie replied dryly, biting into a slice of mango. "There's no chemistry whatsoever." Talon came in last, theatrical, rolling his eyes. "Sweetheart, I watched the two of you dance and almost needed a fire extinguisher. If that's not chemistry, then I'm straight." Meanwhile, Robert stretched his shoulders by the pool, watching his friends. Daston commented, "You're playing with fire, man. You're gonna get burned. Or I'll set everything on fire." Robert answered, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Either way, I'm not stopping." Theodoro only laughed, raising his glass of juice. "Can't. Remember the last time I saw you have this much fun?" The following rehearsals were even more intense. The instructor insisted on sensual choreography, hands sliding along her waist, bodies pressed tight, spins ending with their faces inches apart. "Closer!" the instructor shouted. "You have to convince the audience you're about to devour each other." "That won't be hard," Robert murmured against Zadie's lips, his voice deep enough to make her stomach twist. She gasped, trying to hold herself together. "You're enjoying this way too much, aren't you? More than you think." His fingers pressed lightly at her waist, and she felt her breath falter. In the next rehearsals, the atmosphere seemed less and less about dancing and more about survival. Robert made a point of holding her hand a second longer than the step required, of adjusting her posture by running his warm palm down her back, of dragging his face close enough to her neck that the heat of his breath made her shiver. "You don't need to breathe on the back of my neck, Calder," she muttered, with a tone of irritation that betrayed the shiver in her body. "Don't I?" he teased, his deep voice sliding like a slow song. "It's just that you smell dangerous." She held her breath, eyes flashing. "What, are you writing poetry now? Just describing the effect you have," he shot back, with that crooked smile that seemed designed to disarm her. In one rehearsal, he caught her during a choreographed dip, his face pressed to hers, their mouths separated by a breath. "If I kiss you right now, will it be an accident or a catastrophe?" he whispered, his hot breath brushing her lips. "It'll be you getting slapped." Her voice came out hoarse, betraying the way her gaze lingered on his mouth. Robert smiled, dangerously close, before letting her go all at once, leaving her breathless. The next day, during a spin, his hand slid up her arm to the curve of her shoulder, firm, steady, far too intimate. "Relax, Renner. I've got you. You're holding way too much," she shot back, but the retort lost strength when he leaned close enough for the tip of his nose to graze her cheek. "I'm just practicing self-control, because every time you look at me like that, I almost forget this is supposed to be a dance." Zadie backed away, panting, pretending to drink water just to escape his gaze, but she knew she was doomed. Every rehearsal was a war, where the body betrayed the mind, where hatred slipped dangerously into the territory of desire. The day of the final arrived. The hall was packed, decorated with colorful lights and tables full of guests. The mood was festive, but Zadie was a storm inside. Her dance outfit clung tight, bold, revealing every curve. She tried to convince herself she didn't care about Robert's eyes tracing every detail, but when he brushed his hand along her chin and whispered, "It's going to be hard," keeping my hands only where they're supposed to be, her whole body trembled. The music began. They moved in perfect sync, as if hatred itself were only fuel for an inevitable attraction. Every step crackled with electricity. He spun her, pulled her, pressed their bodies together. Their gazes clashed like swords, but to the audience, all they saw were sparks. At the peak of the performance, Robert guided her with a firmness almost arrogant, but sensual enough to make Zadie forget where she was. His body pressed to hers, his hot breath against the side of her face. Every step felt like a war waged to the rhythm of the music. When he spun her, his hands slid down her waist like he was claiming territory. When he pulled her back, their bodies collided hard, drawing sighs from the crowd. He dipped her low in a choreographed fall, his lips a breath away from hers. The entire hall held its breath, believing they were about to witness a forbidden kiss right there. The middle of the dance, Robert held the position, eyes locked on Zadie, stretching the moment to the edge of madness. Applause erupted when the music ended, but the electricity between them lingered in the air, pulsing. The host bounded onto the stage, still buzzing. What a night, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear the results. In third place, couple number 4, Vivian and Ezra. Cheers, whistles. Zadie tried to catch her breath, but Robert's eyes never left hers, as if they were still dancing. In second place, couple number 2, Sienna and Thayer. More shouting. Her heart pounded like it might explode. Talon was already standing on the table, waving a towel like a cheer squad's banner. And in first place, with a performance that set the hall on fire, couple number 3, Robert and Zadie. The hall erupted. Ciela screamed so loud she lost her voice. Thalia clapped frantically, chanting, "I knew it." Dastan and Theodoro hugged, toasting like they'd won too. But Robert heard none of it. He saw only Zadie. Her body still heaved from the effort of the dance, her loose hair stuck to her skin with sweat, her eyes blazing as if she hated and wanted him at the same time. He couldn't resist. He grabbed her by the waist and crushed his mouth to hers. It was a kiss full of rage and relief, hot and fierce as if all the hate they had built up had melted into desire. Zadie should have shoved him away, but instead she clung to his neck, surrendering to what she had denied for far too long. Applause echoed through the hall, some whistles, some sighs. It was as if everyone had been waiting for that moment. Talon fanned himself, shouting, "Finally!" Ciela was nearly in tears. Thalia laughed in disbelief. When the kiss ended, Zadie was breathless, lips damp, heart racing. Robert rested his forehead against hers and murmured, low enough for only her to hear, "Told you winning would be explosive." She didn't answer, but the silence, the look, the uneven breath spoke louder than words, because deep down they both knew that war had never been only about hate. The kiss still burned on her lips. No matter how many times Zadie wet them or tried to think of something else, the sensation lingered, insistent as if it had branded her. When the hall lights went out after the dance and the victory, she ran off to her room with her friends, trying to convince herself it had just been the heat of the moment. Just chemistry, just misdirected anger, just anything other than what it really was. A kiss she would never forget. In the room, Ciela was sprawled on the bed on her stomach, feet kicking in the air like a teenager thrilled with gossip. "You two looked like you'd walked straight out of a movie, Zadie. That was cinematic. Humiliating, that's what it was," Zadie shot back, flopping onto the bed and covering her face with a pillow. In front of everyone. "Humiliating?" Thalia laughed, grabbing a water bottle from the minibar. "Honey, if that was humiliation, then I want to be humiliated too. The man practically devoured you with his eyes before he kissed you. It was," she sighed dramatically, "apotheotic." Talon, sitting cross-legged in the armchair, fanned himself with a towel as usual. "I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The sexual tension between you two could power the whole state of California. The audience just confirmed the obvious." "Tension?" Zadie scoffed, hiding the smile threatening to break free. "That was pure provocation. He wanted to throw me off, and he did." "Darling." Talon arched a brow, theatrical. "If that was only provocation, then I'm a Franciscan monk." Zadie threw the pillow at him. "Go to sleep, Talon." Meanwhile, in the room next door, Robert was under fire of another kind. Theodoro cracked open a beer and lifted it like a toast. Finally called her. The Renner wall crumbled. "It didn't crumble," Robert retorted, dropping onto the bed. "Just wobbled a little." "Wobbled?" Dastan roared with laughter, stretched out on the couch. "She clung to your neck like her life depended on it. Man, if that's resistance, I want to see what happens when she actually surrenders." Robert picked up his whiskey glass and slowly swirled the liquid. He didn't reply, because deep down, he knew they were both right. The wall had started to crack, and he had no desire to rebuild it. The next morning, the resort seemed even sunnier, as if nature itself conspired to remind them of the night before. Zadie tried to keep her distance, busying herself with long swims in the pool and pretending she was more interested in coconut water than in the man haunting her thoughts. But Robert had no intention of letting her slip away. He appeared beside her in the pool, hair wet, droplets of water sliding down his firm abdomen. Zadie nearly choked on her straw just from looking at him. "Renner, tell me, did I show up in your dreams, or do you want me to take care of that while you're awake?" She arched a brow, keeping her face impassive despite the stumble in her breathing. "I don't waste time on cheap fantasies, Calder." "Perfect." He smiled, leaning close to her ear, his warm breath brushing down her neck. "Because I only deal in premium versions." He leaned in until his mouth was dangerously close to hers. He didn't ask permission. He just took. He kissed. Her right there, in broad daylight in the middle of the pool, ignoring everything and everyone. Her body answered before her mind could. Hands on his shoulders, fingers digging into hot skin. He smiled against her mouth, certain there was no turning back now. When they finally broke apart, Zadie was dazed. "You're unbearable, and you love hating me." He winked, sliding his fingers along her waist before pulling away, leaving her trembling with frustration and desire. That night, Zadie thought she might finally get a break from the provocations, but Robert had other plans. He found her in the lobby, smiling with that look that said he knew exactly what he was doing, and told her he wanted to show her a special place. Against her better judgment, she agreed, and followed alongside him down the resort's torchlit path. On the more secluded stretch of sand, shielded from the bustle, lay the surprise. A blanket spread across the white sand, glass lanterns with candles flickering against the soft breeze, and a basket with fruit, cheeses, and a bottle of wine already uncorked. The sound of the waves cradled the scene, as if the sea itself had conspired for this moment. Zadie stopped, incredulous, her heart racing before she could even think. "What is this, Calder?" Her voice came laced with irony, but the hidden tremor betrayed the impact. He picked up the bottle, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to her, his eyes fixed on her as if every move were part of a silent game, a truce. His smile was slow, almost dangerous. "I promise not to provoke you, at least not until the second glass of wine." She laughed, annoyed at her own reaction. "You're unbearably cocky." "I'm persistent." He raised his glass, locking eyes with her. "And I know exactly what I want." The sea roared in the background. The moon lit the sand like a stage. They drank, ate, talked about everything and nothing. For the first time, Zadie saw the man. Behind the suit and the arrogance, she saw someone who laughed genuinely, who spoke of his friends with loyalty, who looked at her as if no one else in the world existed. When he kissed her again, it was different. There was no audience, no competition. Just the two of them lying on the sand, her body curving into his touch. Clothes discarded, breaths ragged, moans muffled by the crash of the waves. They made love like people who had finally stopped fighting against the current. Afterward, lying side by side, Zadie stared at the starry sky, trying to find words. Robert, however, was direct. "Be my girlfriend?" She turned her head, startled. "Are you serious?" For the first time in a long while, he clasped her hand firm. "Be my girlfriend, Zadie." Her heart thudded hard, and before she could invent excuses, she smiled. Yes. The days that followed were like living inside a dream, one Zadie would never have dared to admit out loud. The provocations that once felt like battles now turned into shared secrets, and every sharp glance became stifled laughter. Robert had that infuriating and charming knack for always being one step ahead, sometimes pulling her into the pool just to hear her scream, sometimes showing up with a flower stolen from the resort's garden, tucking it into her hair as if it belonged there. They went on sunset boat rides, competing over who could take the most ridiculous photo with the palm trees in the background. They had dinners in seaside cabanas, sharing plates and provocations, like when Robert stole shrimp from her plate just to hear her inevitable grumble. They walked the beach at midnight, leaving footprints side by side, until the silence became as comfortable as the kisses that came without warning. Zadie's friends sighed in unison at every unexpectedly tender gesture Robert made, and Talon made a point of narrating everything as if it were a reality show. "Attention, audience," he just held her hand in front of everyone. "That means commitment, darlings." Meanwhile, Theodoro and Ciela grew closer and closer, often spotted talking for hours, laughing as if no one else existed. Dastan and Thalia, on the other hand, were pure fire. They made a point of provoking each other at every chance, ending either in unexpected kisses or in arguments only they seemed to know how to resolve. And Talon, loyal to his boyfriend back in Los Angeles, amused himself as the loud, witty audience to the whole storyline, always with sharp remarks, dramatic applause, and exaggerated sighs. On one of the last nights, Robert took Zadie on a longer walk, guiding her to a secluded part of the beach. There, under the full moon reflected on the water, he spread a blanket on the ground and opened a bottle of wine he had hidden. "Calder," she began, but her voice faltered when he pulled her down to sit beside him. "Shh," he murmured, raising his glass. "Just drink, and admit that I can be romantic." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're impossible, and yet you can't resist me." His reply came low, warm, followed by a slow kiss that dissolved any attempt to deny it. On the last day at the resort, everyone gathered at the bar to toast. The table was full of laughter, glasses raised, and promises to meet again on other trips. Talon stood up, as dramatic as ever, to these unforgettable holidays, to unlikely couples, and to the living proof that hate is only the appetizer before desire. The collective laughter echoed through the hall, and Zadie, laughing along, realized she had never felt so light. The next morning, on the plane back to Los Angeles, each couple settled into their seats. Theodoro and Ciela whispering secrets to each other, Dastan and Thalia fighting over the armrest as if it were a miniature world war, Talon sending lovesick voice notes to his boyfriend, and, in the middle of them all, Zadie and Robert. He laced his fingers through hers. She rested her head on his shoulder, and the comfortable silence between them spoke louder than any provocation. "That was only the first trip, Renner," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "I'm planning many more." She smiled, eyes half closed. "Just don't you dare tease me on all of them." Robert chuckled softly, knowing there wasn't the slightest chance he'd ever keep that promise. The steady hum of the plane cradled the beginning of a new story, one that had nothing left of war, but everything of desire, complicity, and newfound love. 4 years had passed since that vacation that had begun as a declared war in the Caribbean and ended as the prelude to everything that would change their lives. Since then, there had been many trips, some to paradisiacal destinations, others unexpected, all filled with stories that still sparked laughter at group reunions. Each couple had found their own chaotic, passionate rhythm, but all remained bound by the same invisible thread that had started on that trip. Robert and Zadie were married. Yes, married. The number one enemy was now the husband with whom she shared not only teasing and laughter, but also plans for the future. Zadie was pregnant with their first child, and of course Robert never missed a chance to flaunt her belly as if it were the most important trophy of his life. "I already told you it's not a crystal ball for you to keep showing off," she complained, though the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her. "I disagree." He placed a hand over her belly, smiling. "It's our best destination yet." Theodoro and Ciela had taken the family path too, but double. A pair of children already darted through the living room as if they had enough energy to power an entire city. Theodoro, once the most reserved of the group, was now the dad building sandcastles with an improvised crown on his head while Ciela laughed, capturing it all. Thalia and Dastan, well, they had discovered they worked even better as partners than as provocateurs. They were starting a business together, an explosive mix of her creativity and his strategy. The office already looked like a battlefield of colorful post-its, but the two swore it was vision of the future. "We fight in business the same way we fought at the resort," Thalia would say. "The difference is, now it's profitable," Dastan would add, drawing laughter. From everyone. And Talon was the glue that kept them all together. The friend who knew how to laugh at himself, who celebrated everyone else's victories as if they were his own, who was happy and fulfilled in every area of his life. His boyfriend, now husband, fit seamlessly into the group, and together they were the kind of couple that turned any dinner into a show, with music, dancing, and dramatic declarations. "If it weren't for me," Talon would say with false modesty, raising his glass of champagne, "none of this would have happened. You all need to admit it. I saw the chemistry before anyone else." That year's reunion took place at a beach house in Malibu. Between laughter, children running, teasing, and stolen kisses, one certainty lingered in the air. It hadn't just been a trip, nor just an improbable romance. It was the beginning of an entire lifetime of stories they were still far from done writing. Zadie, lying on a lounge chair, looked at Robert playing with their borrowed nieces and nephews, and with her hand over her belly she let a smile slip. The future promised to be noisy, chaotic, full of teasing, exactly the way it had always been with them, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Robert walked over, his eyes burning with the same intensity that had unsettled her since that very first look in the resort lobby years ago. He knelt before her, laid a hand over her belly, and with a smile that was at once teasing and tender, murmured softly enough for only the two of them. 4 years ago, I told you winning would be explosive. I just didn't know our victory would be this. You, me, and now the three of us. Zadie's heart stumbled in her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't answer with irony. She simply brought her hand to his face and let silence speak for her. He kissed her, soft, deep, sealing not just love, but destiny. Around them, friends laughed, children shouted. The sea broke in lazy waves against the sand. But in that moment, none of it existed. Only the two of them. Only that kiss. Only the certainty that, after so many wars and provocations, the greatest plot twist of life was the simplest of all, love. And it was in that kiss, in that shared sigh, that Zadie understood. Sometimes, destiny doesn't get it wrong. It just likes to begin a great story disguised as a fight. So, what did you think of this story? Admit it, you were rooting for this couple too, weren't you? Every provocation, every spark, every stolen glance only made everything more intense. If you had fun and fell in love right along with them, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because it helps so much with growth and allows these stories to reach many more people. I really want to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments which moment moved you the most in this plot. Your participation is essential for the channel to keep bringing stories that will take your breath away.